This is Wall Street Week. I'm David Weston, bringing you stories of capitalism. For many years, Saudi Arabia has been at the center of the world of oil. We traveled to the kingdom to learn how and why it wants to change that. Plus, you thought you knew the world of artificial intelligence, but it turns out it comes in different flavors with different time horizons. We explore the brave new world of mathematical superintelligence and large quantitative models. And as we head into the heart of summer, we take you to some of the nation's theme parks, as traditional leaders Disney and Universal are getting some new competition from some surprising places. But we start with the Federal Reserve Board decision this week and how the central bank is grappling with all that policy uncertainty.
The amount of the tariff effects, the size of the tariff effects, their duration and the time it will take are all highly uncertain. So that is why we think the appropriate thing to do is to hold where we are as we learn more. And we think our policy stance is in a good place where we're well positioned to react to incoming developments. We have to be forward-looking, and the thing that every forecaster, every outside forecaster, and the Fed is saying is that we expect a meaningful amount of inflation to arrive in coming months.
Turning first to our special contributor, Larry Summers of Harvard. So, Larry, we heard from the Federal Reserve, the FOMC, as well as Chair Powell this week. What did you make out of what they had to say, and particularly their projections?
I thought what they said was both predictable and reasonable. You can't be changing monetary policy with the uncertainty that we've got right now. They were right to signal that they were being cautious about future changes. What struck me most, David, was a quite remarkable combination. The dot plot showed unemployment revised upwards, showed inflation revised upwards, even a period when we're getting good news about artificial intelligence and productivity and good news about oil. So you see a supply shock coming, even though the natural sources of supply shocks aren't there. What is it? It's the tariffs. We're imposing a supply shock on ourselves, and that's leading to expectations of both higher inflation and higher unemployment, making the Fed's job that much more difficult. And the Fed's obviously not going to get in a political war with the administration, but the stark analytic fact is clear. It doesn't happen that often that the Fed revises up on inflation and unemployment at the same time. And I don't think there's ever been a time when they revised that way in both directions based on administration policy.
Larry, you mentioned the geopolitical conflict that we're seeing. Certainly, we have an enormous one between Israel and Iran as we speak, with questions about whether the United States might get involved. As a macroeconomist, how do you approach that question?
Look, no one knows. I suspect that the president doesn't know completely what he's going to do because he is watching events. I'd just say a couple things, David. One is that we got a lot of divisions within our country, but I would hope that at a moment like this, with respect to the kind of threat that Iran represents, that there'd be a lot of desire to come together and support policies that will put the greatest stability possible in. Second thing I would advise your listeners, what I do to track very complex events and spheres where I don't have deep expertise is I look for prediction markets. Prediction markets aren't perfect. They're sometimes wrong, just like the stock market is sometimes wrong about the earnings of companies, but they do represent an aggregation of opinion based on people who are prepared to put some money where their mouths are. And the experience now in many spheres, from elections to geopolitical events to movie releases, is that prediction markets have very good track records relative to experts. And what prediction markets are saying is quite interesting. They're saying that the odds of a U.S. attack on Iran are close to 2/3 by the end of this month, close to 3/4 by the end of next month, and that it's a substantial chance, well above 50%, that the supreme leader in Iran will be out of office by the end of this year. So what prediction markets are judging is likely to happen is potentially quite tumultuous. And I think that anyone trying to judge the situation as they form their portfolio would be well advised not to rely only on that, but to give those prediction market judgments weight as they make their own judgments.
If those predictions came true, and as you say, we don't know, but let's assume that happened, that in fact the United States did get involved and that the supreme leader left and there was a regime change in Iran, what would that mean economically? What sectors of the economy would you look at? When we all think about oil, for example, I've also seen food prices raised in terms of fertilizer out of Iran. What sectors do you think might be affected the most?
I think David, I would quibble with you in one respect. I think when you say something's got a 60% chance of happening, you're saying that it's a 60% chance of happening, and there's no such thing as the prediction coming true or the prediction coming false. Either the 60% thing will happen or the 40% thing will happen. So I would choose a somewhat different locution than you did. But to your question, I'd be looking primarily at oil and petrochemicals more generally, fossil fuels more generally, and that, of course, includes fertilizers, includes plastics.
Larry, to be a bit more parochial, at least for us in New York City, we have a mayoral election coming up, including a primary in the Democratic Party. And we have a fairly stark contrast in economic approaches of the two leading candidates, who are Andrew Cuomo, you know well, more of a traditional, it seems to me, Democrat, and a man named Zoran Mamdani, who seems to have a much more extreme, many people think, economic platform. What do you make of that?
David, in a sense, every American is a citizen of New York. It's so much a cultural and financial hub of our country that what happens in New York is consequential for all of us. And I'm not an expert on the exigencies of the details of New York City economic policy, but I do think the Democratic Socialist program would be profoundly dangerous for New York, for the Democratic Party, and for the United States. Set of measures: free college, free childcare, free mass transit, rent control, huge increases in the minimum wage, financed only with tax increases on the wealthy mobile wealthy, who will prove to be mobile if this program is enacted, will, I think, be extremely dangerous. I have warned again and again on your show about the dangers of economic populism of the kind that President Trump has followed, talking about Juan Perón, talking about the dangers of tariffs many times. Frankly, the Democratic Socialist candidate is more populist and more dangerous in his approach on the narrow set of economic issues even than President Trump. And I think if he were to be selected, it would brand the Democratic Party in a highly problematic way. It would suggest that the debate within the Democratic Party was between the Warren Sanders wing and measures that are even more extreme than theirs in terms of the politics of envy, in terms of government control of the economy.
Next on Wall Street Week, imagining a Saudi Arabia that doesn't depend on oil. We go to the kingdom where the CEO of Aramco lays out a bold vision. This is a story about something we haven't seen before. A country weaning itself off oil as its primary source of revenue, even as renewed conflict between Israel and Iran has driven the price of oil up once again. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia pursues a bold plan to move quickly to a diversified economy. And the world's biggest oil producer, Aramco, is in the middle of the transition. Here's our Bloomberg TV colleague, Jumana Bersetchi from Dhahran.
Aramco has long been the beating heart of Saudi Arabia's economy. But in less than 5 years' time, the kingdom hopes to reach its goal of building an economy that moves away from its traditional reliance on oil.
We think of ourselves as a technology company delivering energy, to be honest with you.
Technology has always been our competitive advantage.
The company has been evolving ever since its inception.
Aramco plays a significant role in Saudi's diversification agenda.
Aramco's journey started in 1933 when the Saudi government granted exploration rights to the Standard Oil Company of California. That created the Californian Arabian Standard Oil Company and eventually led to the discovery of oil in commercial quantities at Dammam Well Number 7. This marked a turning point in Aramco and Saudi Arabian history. In 1944, the company was renamed to Aramco, the Arabian American Oil Company, and later that became Saudi Aramco, reflecting its transition to a fully state-owned company by the late 80s.
Look at that. You can feel the crude here, huh?
So I'm looking at crude now. Nasser joined Aramco in 1982 as an oil engineer before working up the ranks to become CEO in 2015.
So this is the geology.
Yeah.
Where does the technology come into it?
Well, technology comes in the modeling, and some of the technology, you can see it here. So we digitize all of that, and we kept it here so they can look at it and learn while, having more data to see rather than only what you see in front of you here.
In 2019, the Saudi government sold down 1.5% of the company, raising $25.6 billion, which to date remains the largest IPO in history. Today, the Saudi government and sovereign wealth fund PIF jointly own around 98% of Aramco's shares. The oil giant accounts for approximately 60% of total Saudi government revenue. And the broader oil sector, with Aramco as the main player, makes up roughly 30 to 40% of the kingdom's GDP.
Relying on one sector only to drive the Saudi economy is not right. And this is where the vision is. They are helping other sectors, growing other sectors across the kingdom to grow. Oil and gas is still important. That's why you see the growth. You see, we are very pragmatic here in the kingdom. You're talking about 100 to 130 gigawatt of solar and wind. We believe in hydrogen, where we'll be happy to produce hydrogen. Actually, we have one of the biggest projects in green hydrogen at NEO. And we will be more than happy to build more green hydrogen and blue hydrogens in the kingdom. And at the same time, we are in carbon capture and storage, but we are not neglecting hydrocarbon. We have a healthy oil production. We have a maximum sustained capacity of 12 million. We are growing our gas by more than 60% by 2030. So we are focusing on our conventional and growing it while decarbonizing at the same time. And we're building the new, which is solar, wind, hydrogen, and others.
The kingdom's crown jewel is central to the ambitions of Vision 2030, the government program aiming to diversify the economy away from hydrocarbon dependence, attract foreign investment, and modernize the Saudi Arabian society. Carla Slim is chief economist at Standard Chartered, covering regions including the Middle East.
In the past, the diversification strategy was investing petrodollars, oil revenues abroad, so that they would be uncorrelated to the price of oil. And for the last decade, Aramco's dividends to the budget have contributed indirectly to funding a lot of the diversification strategy in the domestic economy. So they remain a very important piece of the Saudi economy, of the revenues, in order to fund that government spending and that investment.
From creating Neom, a $500 billion futuristic city in the desert, to hosting the 2034 World Cup and building out a new major airport in Riyadh, Vision 2030 is well underway. The kingdom's transition is not without its challenges. OPEC Plus production cuts undermine a key source of revenue for the country despite diversification efforts. In the first quarter of 2025, Saudi Arabia recorded its largest budget deficit since 2021. That's impacted spending for some of the kingdom's largest investment projects. And Aramco has increasingly tapped into debt markets, which the company has put down to looking to lower its weighted cost of capital and optimizing the capital structure.
Our gearing today is around 5%, still one of the lowest gearing. It's almost half of the average compared to other energy industry players in the market. And we will continue to tap into that additional bond markets and on the future. But we have a low gearing ratio. It's still, as you consider, very low compared to any players in the markets.
The size of the dividend, especially to its largest shareholder, the Saudi government, remains under scrutiny relative to free cash flow generated. Geopolitical tensions have also remained an undercurrent of concern since the 2019 attacks on Aramco's Abqaiq facility. Although the company resumed partial operations within 24 hours, the incident triggered a heightened focus on security. In response, Saudi Arabia has worked to ease regional tensions, including restoring diplomatic ties with Iran in 2023. Even as the company manages near-term pressures, Aramco is investing in areas that could define its long-term future.
I think gas is going to be a major growth area for the company. Today, and this is not known to many people, we are a large gas producer.
Ashraf Ghazawi is Aramco's EVP for Strategy and Corporate Development. He lays out the non-oil key strategic pillars of the business.
Our gas business is going to grow by 60% by 2030 compared to the 2021 levels. And you will see the company grow and continue to invest in a lot of low carbon or new energies. In particular, you will see Aramco investing now in renewables energy and in hydrogen and ammonia, as well as carbon capture and storage technology. Not to mention, digital and digitization is a big area for us. Further integration down the value chain is an important area for you to basically have an outlet for these vast hydrocarbon resources. Chemicals to us is a main building block for all modern economies and modern societies. You'll always need commodities and materials like plastics and polymers for any type of economic development going forward.
Like in most industries, one of its most ambitious bets to move the company forward is artificial intelligence.
AI, we see as one of the most important developments in this century in terms of technology. And so we have been quick to deploy AI in our operations and to apply it to our business.
Ahmed Al-Khawaitir leads tech and innovation at Aramco. Data from the company's facilities and operations end up here at its 4th Industrial Revolution Center. Last year, Aramco announced it was developing a large-scale industrial AI model called Aramco MetaBrain.
The MetaBrain is a 70 billion parameter model, and the reason we chose to build a proprietary large language model is because we have to use our own data. And it gives us a competitive advantage. So we have trained that model with all of our historical data, engineering reports, standards, and that model is now used to advise our engineers and operators and every single employee in the company. So we have deployed that model on 70,000 workstations across our facilities and in our offices. But not only is it providing advice, but it is also informing for better decisions. It is the base foundation for many of the applications we are doing in optimization, for example, and operating our facilities. So that's the way we are able to bring AI right to the field.
This is where you see a lot of the use cases delivering results for us. Technology realization in 2023 used to be $2 billion. This is how much we realized from technology. In 24, $4 billion. And we're looking at $2 to $4 billion per year in technology. AI is in everything embedded, not only in terms of allowing us to reduce our cost structure, more efficiency, it also helps us in reducing our carbon footprint. It is very important in able you see it introducing emissions, increasing productivity, and with that the number of wells, water production, and with that emissions and less pumping. In everything it's embedded, and we are looking at the benefits of AI integrating it in everything that we are doing.
Even with big strides in digital innovation, Aramco at its core remains an energy giant. As CEO of one of the largest hydrocarbon companies in the world, Nasser has been advocating for what he considers a more pragmatic approach to the energy transition.
Well, we have always said that we need a transition reset or a reality check in the transition to deliver on our ambition for a net zero. What we need is a pragmatic solutions to deliver on what we are all aiming for. Almost 70 to 80% of the energy, global energy in 2050 will be in the global south, not in the global north. So one size fits all will not work. And anything that is driven heavily by incentive, that's not sustainable. The minute these incentives disappear, and they will disappear one day, that additional cost will be passed to consumer. And that's where we are seeing the increase in cost. What we need is something that, while sustainable, is affordable and secure. We have always talked about different mix of energy that will be required.
Aramco has a net zero 2050 target for its Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions and prides itself on having the lowest carbon intensity for upstream extraction compared to other energy companies. But this does not include Scope 3 emissions, which stem from end-user combustion of oil and fossil fuels and constitute the lion's share of emissions.
I have to say that not all crude oil is equal. We take a lot of pride in the fact that we are the lowest upstream carbon intensity producer and has been for a while, and that's a result of decades of responsible and sustainable operations. It's important for us also to adhere to our commitments toward the net zero ambition and keeping an eye on what levers of decarbonization are available to us. We have been running flare minimization programs for decades. We have methane intensity that is the lowest in the market. All of these combines actually is where we position ourselves as the undisputed leader when it comes to carbon intensity and environmental metrics out there.
Aramco looks to redefine its role as Saudi Arabia reimagines its future.
We believe Saudi will remain a major oil producer in the global economy. We don't expect this to change, but we believe that the non-oil GDP expansion will happen in parallel to Saudi remaining a major commodity player on the global front, on the regional front, in its G20 capacity. We just expect that the non-oil development will happen in tandem, in parallel, and this will continue to have shifts to how Saudi spends domestically, globally, in the region as well, with its regional allies.
There is a lot of challenges ahead of us, especially with sustainability, with the transitions, with disruptive technologies. We need to be ready. How do we maintain and continue to maintain that leadership while also delivering the new energies that the world wants?
Coming up, just when you thought you were getting your arms around artificial intelligence large language models, along come an array of alternatives. We delve into large quantitative models and even superintelligence. That's next on Wall Street Week. This is a story about thinking ahead, even way ahead. We've all heard about the race between companies and countries to develop artificial intelligence. But it turns out that there's another race going on, one among entirely different approaches to AI and what they're racing to achieve.
Generally, we think the cost of innovation is collapsing here.
It is going to transform our lives. We're going to look back and see this as a hugely important era.
This is obviously the most disruptive technology in the history of mankind.
At the center of many of the latest AI breakthroughs are large language models, or LLMs, the ChatGPTs and Geminis of this world. But as powerful as they are becoming, we learn more every day about their limitations, how they can be prone to errors, hallucinations, and uncertainty. One of those trying to address these limitations is none other than Vlad Tenev, known to most of us as the CEO and co-founder of Robinhood Markets. Tenev has become a successful entrepreneur, but his background is in mathematics.
What a lot of people don't know about me is actually before I became an entrepreneur, I was a mathematician, or at least an aspiring mathematician. I always had this passion for mathematics and for advancing our understanding of reality. And so when we saw GPT-4 come out, along with a bunch of improvements in the mathematics community around formal verification, Tudor, who's my co-founder and CEO of Harmonic, and I got very, very excited about building something. We thought that the time was right to actually build something in mathematics that combined the state-of-the-art in that field with the state-of-the-art in AI.
Tenev's new firm, Harmonic, hopes to achieve something that still belongs to the realm of science fiction. Beyond artificial narrow intelligence like ChatGPT, which can perform specific and limited tasks, beyond even an artificial general intelligence which could learn and adapt like humans. Tenev says his goal is to help create what he calls a mathematical superintelligence.
So mathematical superintelligence is artificial intelligence that can reason and solve math problems at a level exceeding the most advanced mathematics researchers, so professional mathematicians that are out there today. And we think that developing such a system will not only greatly accelerate the progress of mathematics, but it'll also accelerate progress in all fields of science and technology that depend on mathematics.
We have heard at this point so much about large language models in the AI space. What you describe sounds like almost the obverse of large language models, which, as I understand it, operate on language rather than on numbers or on mathematics.
I think the main problem with large language models and AI systems as they're currently designed is that they very, very confidently can tell you the wrong thing. So there's very few controls over what we call hallucinations. You'll ask a large language model a question, it'll give you an answer. You can ask it to solve a major mathematical conjecture and it'll spit out output. And it can be very convincing in its incorrectness. And so I think that's a huge problem. And that's by and large what's hindered the adoption of these AI tools in mission critical industries. And the way that Harmonic has designed our AI from the beginning is with correctness and verifiability, being a first-class citizen.
Last year, Harmonic closed a $75 million Series A funding round led by Sequoia Capital and announced that its AI had performed well in a test of mathematical reasoning. But Tenev says there's still work to do before true mathematical superintelligence is achieved and before Harmonic can roll out a product to consumers.
We're still in fairly early stages, but we're actually getting close to unveiling our technology to the public. So the team actually released a big result about 9 to 12 months ago where we showed really tremendous advancements across a few key mathematics benchmarks that were focused on formal mathematics.
Give us a sense of that development process. I mean, are you working toward a prototype or do you have a prototype already?
We have some things internally that we're refining. And basically, the company is largely focused on research because without a strong model that keeps getting better and better, it's not as useful. But over the past few months, we've started to turn more and more of our resources towards commercialization and actually figuring out how we're going to put it into people's hands, who the customers are, what the biggest pain points we can help solve for customers are.
While Tenev and his colleagues walk the long and uncertain road towards superintelligence, Jack Hittery has built a business around what he calls large quantitative models, which are trained on numbers and data rather than on prose. His company, Sandbox AQ, spun off from Alphabet in 2022.
What we can do is we can take the equations of biology, of chemistry, of physics, of engineering, and we can train an AI on those. And that's the world now of large quantitative models, LQMs. And this world of LQMs impacts 80% of our economy and drives massive innovation in the companies that use them. And so you have large language models on the one hand, and from a business point of view, they're mainly there to cut some costs. If you have, say, $30 million of costs every year in your company, you could probably start lopping off 10, 15, 20 million of customer service costs per year. And that's going to be a great savings for your company. But when it comes to creating new product, billions of dollars of new revenue, that's not really going to be a large language model. That's going to be an LQM, a large quantitative model.
Where are we in developing LQMs?
LQMs are now proliferating in the B2B land. So it's less about consumers using LQMs, but it's really about businesses using LQMs. And right now, we announced at Sandbox AQ that we're working with Sanofi, for example, a top 10 pharma company, using LQMs to advance their work in life-saving medicines. We announced work with chemical companies such as Aramco using LQMs to up value the hydrocarbons coming out so we can create new products that will not be burned in the atmosphere, but rather be put into various kinds of vehicles and others to lightweight and to add value to those industries as well.
There's a lot of money being invested in AI right now. A lot, hundreds of billions of dollars literally being invested. From what you understand, where are the places to look for good investments, or even better, what would you advise an investor to look out for, both on the upside and the downside, in considering investing in AI?
There's two real ways to play the AI future. One is to focus on a number of mainly private AI companies that are out there now, and various people and various banks are able to put together vehicles to invest in these, and so that's one way to really focus on that. The second is to look at the public markets, and we look at the public markets. Again, you can look at the hyperscalers such as Amazon, Microsoft, Google, and others, and you could place your bets there, because essentially those are AI-driven companies at this point. But another way to make your AI play that actually may be more fruitful is to look at industry by industry, David, and understand who are going to be the AI winners and AI losers in the pharmaceutical industry, in the energy industry, in the telco industry, in the financial services sector. Each of these are 8, 10, 15 trillion dollar sectors. And the winners and losers there are going to really determine billions and billions of dollars of value of market cap difference as those two groups diverge. The winners who are embracing AI and the laggards who are not embracing AI fast enough.
Whoever the winners and losers might be tomorrow, picking them today is anything but certain. MIT professor Alex Pentland says there will be no one-size-fits-all solution.
I think it's pretty clear that different AI will be used for different purposes. It's just like humans are expert in one thing or another. You want to have as much sort of information and depth in something like designing drugs or medicines or doing climate change as you possibly can. Your climate change model doesn't need to speak 20 different languages, so don't waste the power of the language by training on that sort of thing.
You have a deep understanding of artificial intelligence, and you are an academic. I'm not going to ask you for investment advice, except I am. Here at Bloomberg, there's an awful lot of money, tens of billions, even hundreds of billions of dollars going into artificial intelligence. Where should investors be looking to really put money into artificial intelligence? Or should they just be trying a lot of different things, hoping something pays off?
Well, if you're actually a qualified investor so that you have enough money to sort of spread it around, I would stick with things that have a very clear, defined business case. So I mentioned accounting, right? Or say taxes. Intuit is worth a lot of money because it uses AI to help you with your taxes. Clear business case there. So look for other things like that, for drug discovery, for risk evaluation, things like that. One thing not to do is assume that whatever it is that they're building, this AI that they're building, will never make mistakes, because it will. everything makes mistakes sometimes. And you have to make sure that the thing that you're doing when it makes that mistake doesn't bankrupt the company.
Disney World has some new company as a wide array of companies and brands try to follow the lead of the dominant theme park company. That's next on Wall Street Week. This is a story about making dreams come true. For years, media and entertainment companies have used their intellectual property to create unforgettable live experiences through theme parks. But their success is attracting new competition from new quarters. My colleague Scarlett Fu has the story.
Summertime conjures up hot days, late nights, and roller coaster rides. And answering the call, the themed entertainment industry, which is currently worth an estimated $76 billion and projected to reach more than $120 billion by 2033. The leaders, Disney, Universal, Merlin Entertainment, and Chimelong Group of China, all generated experience revenues in the billions last year. But Disney is a clear standout, booking $34 billion in revenue alone, which is almost 3 times the combined revenue of its smaller competitors. And holding it all together, fictional characters and immersive storytelling.
Intellectual property really has become the cornerstone of the modern theme park industry, and we've seen them grow exponentially through the years.
Dennis Spiegel is a theme park expert who's been working in the industry for more than 50 years.
There have been some very interesting situations developed through the years. Disney bought Marvel, Spider-Man, Iron Man, all of those wonderful characters. Those characters were already being used at Universal Studios Florida, a couple of miles away from Disney World. So in that agreement, Disney cannot use the Marvel characters in Orlando. In England, there's a Harry Potter Studios tour, which is very close to where the Universal Studio Park will be. But at this point in time, they haven't announced if Harry Potter is going to be allowed to be used in that.
Now, other entertainment companies want in on the action, leveraging their most popular IP.
Some of my favorite shows are Netflix and have been for a long time.
The people here just bring the energy.
I love Netflix. I'm obsessed with Stranger Things, Squid Game, The Witcher, anything and everything they release.
We realize there's really a way here to bring fans closer to the stories that they love through live experiences.
As Netflix expands its library of original content, the streaming company is looking beyond its platform. Since 2020, Netflix has incorporated characters from some of its biggest hits into live experiences, culminating in permanent themed entertainment centers.
I'd consider Netflix House like a totally new dimension of storytelling because we'll be able to really keep it fresh, and sort of maintain that same pace of cultural impact and conversation that people see from our movies and TV shows.
Josh Simon is Netflix's Vice President of Consumer Products. He's in charge of a new theme park-style venture called Netflix House.
Later this year, we'll open our first 2 Netflix House locations, one at the King of Prussia Mall outside of Philadelphia and one at the Galleria in Dallas. We recently announced that we're also going to be opening a location in Las Vegas in 2027 as well.
All of those experiences are about engaging with fans and then taking all that information and saying, okay, we are ready to launch permanent experiences.
Marion Lee is Netflix's Chief Marketing Officer.
We'll have replay, which is sort of that concept of an old school arcade, but it will be all obviously Netflix shows and movies and games related to that.
A Netflix Bites restaurant and bar, a retail store, a theater.
And then we'll have a mini golf, Squid Game and Wednesday in one, and then One Piece and something else in the other, and Stranger Things.
It's really a great way for fans to experience those hero moments from their favorite Netflix movies and TV shows.
We are not trying to fit ourselves into one box.
Netflix does not break out sales of consumer products and live experiences, but in 2024, the company surpassed 300 million paying memberships, grew revenue by 16%, while its operating income exceeded $10 billion for the first time ever. And in the past 5 years, Netflix has created more than 400 experiences in 300-plus cities across the globe. In a world of screens, live experiences appear to be in demand. But will they sustain viewers' interest over the longer term?
When we're thinking about which live experiences to bring to life, there's usually a couple ways we think about it. First is we really follow fan passion. We see this incredible love for stories all over the world. The other thing is we really look for our experiences to tell like a new dimension of a story. So, we're interested in movies and TV shows that we know fans want to explore in new ways.
One of the key critical things that allows us to really set ourselves apart is that we have a rabid fan base. We have 1.2 billion fans across all of our social media accounts around the world. And they are telling us what they want to do. We can hear what they're talking about, what kinds of products they're buying, what kinds of food that they're eating whenever they go. And then it allows us to take that information and invest into future experiences that we can place all around the world.
Even before Netflix entered the picture, the theme park industry was a kind of survival of the fittest scenario. Smaller companies struggling to keep up with changing consumer tastes, the biggest players under pressure to roll out new attractions, highlighting the latest technology, and everyone, no matter their size, spending continuously to give visitors a reason to keep coming back.
Typically, a park will fail because either the market isn't ready, it's not a good concept. I tell a lot of people in our industry, just because you have an idea doesn't mean it's a good one. And we've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly of theme parks.
What do the big guys not understand? What do they get wrong?
Historically, the local amusement park went from being a 2 to 92 family park to a thrill park. I think our industry got addicted to the growth that a roller coaster brings. But what happened was it really changed the demographic of the park. They reduced the amount of entertainment, they reduced the amount of show, the culinary experience was reduced because they were getting the growth by just focusing on roller coasters and thrill rides. And so now they've kind of maxed out where the thrill ride can take them. And you've seen this with Six Flags and some of the changes they're trying to make to move back towards broader family experiences. So I would say there were some mistakes made that brought them to where they are today.
COVID-19 dealt a big blow to theme parks, forcing them to shut down for weeks and sometimes months. And that's exactly when Netflix made its move into live experiences.
We were looking for a way to bring Stranger Things to life. People were spending a lot of time, on their own, in their cars. We took over a couple 100,000 square foot parking garage downtown LA and basically created like a pop-up theme park attraction.
Well, we haven't seen this really. I mean, this is our entertainment industry from that standpoint. The streaming is really changing. It's bringing us that shorter story.
For our industry, it really is about how do we define ourselves as a live experience. There's a lot of people who feel that virtual experiences are going to become bigger than real life experiences. And so we've got to make sure that we continue to make great experiences so that doesn't really happen.
Andrew Wexler is CEO of Herschend, the largest family-owned theme attractions company in North America. Herschend's first attraction was Silver Dollar City in Branson, Missouri in 1960. It has since built a portfolio of family-friendly entertainment brands from the Harlem Globetrotters exhibition basketball team to Dollywood in the Great Smoky Mountains in Tennessee. In contrast to Netflix, Herschend's Silver Dollar City features IP that's tied to its local history, starting with a cave.
How did a cave spawn a theme park?
Hugo and Mary Herschend went on a road trip. They came to Southwest Missouri to the Ozarks to enjoy the beauty, and they did a cave tour here and really fell in love with location, with the cave, with the people, and decided they wanted to make it a summer attraction. So the cave tour was so popular that there were long lines to get in the cave, and they needed to give some people something to do. It's kind of the first instance of line management. So they built this 1880s town on top of the cave so people could be entertained.
Since the 1970s, Herschend has focused on bringing new live shows and rides to Silver Dollar City while keeping its IP rooted in the area's 1880s lore. As a result, the park feels timeless, which is reinforced by its long-serving staff.
I've been the Vice President of Food Service since 1992, and this is my 50th year. I've started from the ground up, and I'm still here.
It's also got a cult following, with local families making regular pilgrimages generation after generation.
All I know is for my 8th birthday, we went that day,
It was my 108th time going, I think.
And I remember a lot of my childhood coming back.
They have some rides at Six Flags, but these rides are like really fun.
We've been coming since we were little ourselves. Like, I don't even remember my first time coming.
Yeah, I don't remember my first time. It's just been always part of our lives.
If you look at most theme parks across America, they were organic. They started off as a petting zoo or a campground, and then they added rides and slowly grew over time. Most successful theme parks are like that. It's really hard to go from 0 to 100 at a theme park today just because of the capital intensity and the ability to actually draw enough people to make it cash flow positive.
So you're continuously reinvesting in the business. How do you think about return on investment?
So we know what the return is that our shareholders would like on the business. And so we incorporate that in our capital plans. So we do long range plans, so we try and identify what are our projects over the next 10 years. Now, you got to be nimble and flexible. It may change, but within that, what's the impact of that investment and how's it going to grow the park from an attendance perspective?
I think about bigger competitors or peers. Universal, it engages in an IP review every 2 to 3 years, and it looks critically at its own properties. It also does an overall, assessment of the media landscape. What does that look like on your end?
It's about gaps and needs. The IP is just one element of the experience. What are the frictions that make it hard to enjoy the park? Waiting in line, having to walk a certain distance from one place to another. How do you improve that sort of experience? So while it's great they do an IP review, for us it's about experience review and how do we make the experience better.
Theme parks live on repeat visitation, and repeat visitation is generated by what we call CapEx, the dollars that we invest every year. So the new rides and attractions that we put in every year bring the people back.
But this is a capital-intensive business, so how do you plan out how much you're going to spend?
Well, fortunately, our business does generate cash, and so we have a set percentage of the cash that we generate each year that we know is going to go back into capital. So really the debt part is irrelevant when it comes to our CapEx, unless we wanted to make an acquisition or do something that was above and beyond. We really are about that live local experience with the idea that if our purpose as a company is to bring families closer together, having somebody necessarily sit in front of a television is not the best way to do that.
Next, mimicking the most complex thing in the universe, the human brain. There was a time when scientists working on artificial intelligence thought the best way forward was classifying data and building decision trees. But it turned out that the better, more elegant solution was to mimic the human brain, as Jack Hidary of Sandbox AQ explains.
Large language models, an incredible innovation, started in 2017 with a paper by colleagues of ours at Google. They wrote a paper, David, called Attention is All You Need. And they were focused on how to structure a neural network that would be able to recreate human language. And what is a neural network? Let's start with that first. Well, our brains have roughly 86 to 100 billion neurons, nerve cells. And they're wired up and they're connected up to each other. And in fact, the average brain has between 100 trillion and 1,000 trillion connections connecting those neurons in our brain. The brain is the most complex artifact we've ever found in the universe to date. So 100 trillion to 1,000 trillion connections. And here is the kicker. The crescendo of that is that those connections can change based on the feedback we get as toddlers listening to the languages around us in our family home. We might be in a single language family, say just knowing English. Maybe it's bilingual, maybe a trilingual family. We're going to absorb all that, and the strengths of those connections between two neurons and then across the whole network will change rapidly, second to second. Based on what we're hearing and the feedback we're getting, we'll know that when we see a car, it's associated with that word, C-A-R, car, right? Or in other languages, carro, or voiture in French, or other languages like that. And so this ability for our human brain to have a complex network of neurons and have those neurons connected by synapses, by connections, and have those connection strengths be modified quickly in milliseconds to seconds over our lifetime. That's how we remember. That's how we acquire skills. And so in the 1940s, neuroanatomists and others started looking at the brain and saying, wait a second, what can we learn from the brain and understand about computing? How do we build computing that's similar to the brain? And over the course of decades, what we understood is that we can build not a BNN, a biological neural network, we can build an ANN, an artificial neural network. And an ANN seeks to mimic, seeks to be inspired by the biological neural network and instantiate a neural net, essentially symbolic neurons with connections. And these are all numbers now. So it's just numbers in the computer. And then update those connections, those strengths between one neuron, one artificial neuron, and another in the computer, update it based on feedback. So we show the computer a picture of a car. We say this is associated with the word car. And then we train it on a set of such examples. It turns out you need millions of examples to actually train these artificial neural nets, just like a toddler who has millions of interactions around them in the first 5-6 years of life. And it turns out it worked. It turns out that having a artificial neural network in a computer, as you grow the complexity, you can start to do more and more things. And in 2017, 8 individuals, 8 researchers at Google wrote a paper that said, we can actually now make an artificial neural network that goes beyond state-of-the-art previously in producing and understanding human language. And that model, David, is called the transformer model. And that model was promulgated in that paper, put out in conferences. The folks at OpenAI saw that. The folks at other companies saw that. Other parts of Google read the paper, and it started to promulgate, leading to the explosion supernova of ChatGPT 3 years ago, and leading to many innovations, particularly in these large language models. And what is the language model itself? It is when you absorb in the biggest corpus of words that we know of as humans, which is the World Wide Web. Over the past 35 years, we humans have built a citadel in the sky. We have built the largest collection of human thought, human essays, words, dialogue, theater, plays, videos. All that is now part of the training set for these language models. And so, again, imagine a toddler. A toddler is going to be bombarded with tons of input around them from their parents and grandparents and kids in school. And now this toddler, this language model, absorbs in, it gets trained on the web, and is able to use the transformer model to make a prediction, David, on what that next word would be, what the next paragraph would be if you give it a prompt. And sure enough, it draws upon all that training. It's not just memorizing something from the web and repeating it. That's not what it's doing. It actually learned the structure of human language and is able to produce new language based on your prompt and will produce that paragraph. So that's a large language model. And certainly we can use it in a wide variety of applications now in both personal life and business life. In personal life, people are using it to write love letters to their spouses and significant others. I've also heard of people writing their breakup notes to folks as well. But we can use it in our personal life, and of course, it's transforming business. In business, we use a lot of documents, and so LLMs can be used to summarize content out there so that you can quickly absorb what's happening in a particular news story. It can be used in customer service so that United Airlines, Delta, Lufthansa can use it to have better customer service. And of course, it can be used to produce all kinds of content. And we're getting more and more creative now in the content it produces. And so Hollywood now has to really pay attention. And the world of creativity in film, music, theater is going to be transformed dramatically due to large language models.
So if large language models are one of the tools that we call AI, what are the things it is designed to do well? What are the things that it cannot do as well?
So David, any tool that we have, that we make as humans, have pros and cons, have limitations and capabilities. In the case of large language models, does a great job at giving you a pretty good sense of what a good essay would be, or a paragraph, an answer, if you train it on thousands of examples of customer service responses and Q&A with your customer service agents over a 10-year period, you'll probably get a pretty good language model response based on the next query that comes in. But language models also have some limitations. First of all, they have hallucinations. And what is a hallucination in a language model? Well, similar to humans, we can get things wrong, and language models can get things wrong as well because it's trained on human content. About a year ago, one of the language models was trained, and that training, of course, included Reddit, which has a wide variety of content on it, let's just say. And then somebody prompted the language model and asked it, what's the best way to keep cheese on the pizza? I'm making a pizza, and the cheese seems to be sliding off when I make my new fresh pizza. How do I keep the cheese on the pizza? The language model had read a post on Reddit that people were using Elmer's glue to keep the cheese on the pizza. It was a tongue-in-cheek post on Reddit, but the language model it's not human, doesn't really have a sense of humor, and so it just spit out to the user based on this prompt that indeed you should use Elmer's glue to keep the cheese on the pizza. So, these are the kinds of things that happen because you're training it on a lot of information with a variety of quality.
That does it for us here at Wall Street Week. I'm David Weston. See you next week for more stories of capitalism.